Hello, xin chào. Welcome to Chuyện Du Học, a podcast series produced by the College Compass program here at Everest Education. I'm Tony, chairman and co-founder of Everest Education, and today your host for this episode. Chuyện Du Học is a podcast show that aims to help students and parents explore the world of international education and get inspired by stories from our fascinating guests. Episodes touch on various aspects of studying abroad, higher education, and career growth. Today, we have an amazing speaker who I've gotten to know personally over the last year and have had a chance to work with him at Everest as well. Not only as an advisor to our strategy for our online business, but also working as one of our College Compass counselors, our senior lead counselors in our program. So really excited to have James with us today.
Hey, Tony, it's great to be here.
Let me give a short bio on yourself, and then please add into it if I miss anything significant, right? So if I remember correctly, you were a Taiwanese American kid who grew up in Cerritos, California. You dropped out of high school. You then went to serve in the military for 13 years. And yet you still managed to assemble a huge array of degrees, USC for philosophy, business, engineering, and tech, if I remember correctly, and then Stanford, GSB, and even programs at HBS, if I remember, right? And after an extensive career in the military, you went into venture capital, focusing on education and ed tech and the related fields there. And then also have experience as a startup executive working with VIP Kid, one of the largest ed tech companies in China, helping them grow to be, the giant that they are there. But have I missed anything there out of your background?
No, if anything, I feel like, when you put it that way, it sounds like I'm such an old man, right?
and yet you're like, what, 20 years younger than me?
No, I'm old at heart and body.
Okay, if I also remember correctly, you're only 35 years old. Is that right?
I am. I am 35.
Okay, so I have 7 years on you of experience, yet I feel like you have a life of experience on me, both just in the business knowledge as well as the personal life wisdom. And I honestly really enjoy all of our conversations, ranging from obviously a lot around product management and startup, but to philosophy and community and hate crimes against Asians and all sorts of things.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate that. Likewise. You're definitely maybe my dogs. I definitely spend an inordinate amount of time hanging out with you. Really enjoy our conversation. So this one included.
All right. So let's see if we can take the conversation in a different direction for our audience today. The focus is on a lot of families who are considering studying overseas. And maybe we can kick off with your college experience. So how old were you when you finally went to college, and how did that come about, given you were in the military?
Yeah, so I went to college relatively, not too far behind where I should have. I started college around when I was 20. So I did 3 years of active duty and then moved into reserves. Did a deployment and then ran, like a platoon when I was relatively young. And I was like, this is a lot of leadership experience. I think I've had about as much as I'm going to need for a little while. I'd like to, live a normal life and maybe make my parents or help my parents stop worrying a little bit. So when I was 20, I left the military, went to community college for about 2 years. Then I transferred to USC, where I was actually an international exchange host and also a residential advisor for new freshmen. So
I think I forgot that part. Yeah. So USC at that time, what was the mix of students like? How many international students were there, and what was it like to manage that experience for them?
Oh, yes, so many international students. SC is a massive, I think because of the location and where we are in California, we just attract a ton of international students. I don't know what the exact breakdown was, but I know we're very high proportionally, like one of the highest in the country. And it was great. I always make comments about how I'm only recently discovering what it means to be an adult in LA. Like I grew up here, but when you grow up in a place, you don't really, explore much or travel much. At least I didn't.
Me neither. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know many places, but when I became a host and an RA, right, a big part of that job is to make sure that people get the quote unquote full college experience. And so really got to, take them out to LA, show them around, as well as particularly with the international students, helping them to acclimate to, American culture and what that feels like. And, things that we take for granted as almost like common sense, right? Someone used to tell me that common sense isn't common. And I think that's like, you see it so clearly with, especially with international students.
I guess you saw a wide variety of international students there. Like, were there any Vietnamese students at USC back then?
I don't believe because we didn't have a partner university with Vietnam. So that's right. Typically that's what you kind of need. You need like some sort of flagship university that would sort of create this like transfer agreement. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of Vietnamese American friends who have gone to USC and Asian American friends, obviously, who have also gone through USC. And I always felt that there's quite a substantial number of Asian students studying at the university. And every time, I go to the campus, my wife is a professor at the medical school there now. So occasionally I go onto the campus for various reasons. And I feel like it's a very diverse school as far as university environments go there. Did you ever feel any safety issues or discrimination issues? Because I feel like that's a question that so many parents ask us, even when like their kids are thinking about going to these universities in big cities. But did you ever have any issues?
No, I did not. But I mean, I also, I was coming in, 3 years after the military, after a deployment to Iraq and running like 30 burly, soldiers, right? So I didn't really, there wasn't much I was scared of at the time. And I was a much bigger guy than I actually am now. And so, no, but I mean, the other thing I can speak to, and, I can't say with 100% certainty, but if I had a strong, if I was a betting man, I would say that, the culture at SC was one that was just, always so inclusive. Safety was number one priority, right? Because already people are worried, it's in South Central LA, and what does that mean? But actually, the campus itself is beautiful. There's a ton of security, and actually they gentrified pretty aggressively the area around it. And so I would say it's probably safer now than it was even when I was there.
Yeah, got it.
Chuyện Du Học podcast is produced by College Compass, a college advisory program of Everest Education. We offer strategic solutions to aspiring grade 9 to grade 12 students to get into the best universities and college in the world. Our program is led by experienced admissions counselors from Harvard, Stanford, MIT, UPenn, and others. Over the years, our students have been accepted to top universities including Harvard, Stanford, Cornell, Duke, Williams, Amherst, amongst many, many others. We offer a personalized pathway and strategies for each student, including school selection, standardized testing, extracurricular activity guidance, essay writing, scholarship applications, and anything else. No matter what phase you're in, we offer a package that is tailored to your age, your preferences, and your own personal goals to help you achieve your dreams. Learn more about College Compass by clicking on the link in the description.
And then if you could do a compare and contrast between Stanford and USC, like two of the big top universities in California, how would you compare the schools academically, in terms of the community, and the overall experience?
Oh boy. It's hard to compare. They're both just amazing experiences. I would say that by far, I felt that SC was an inspiring place, right? it's a beautiful campus because it's relatively small. Everything's kind of packed together. You meet lots of your peers. You feel like you feel really like you're part of a community that you can sort of belong to. And the football games obviously always help with that, but everything about it just felt, to me, awe-inspiring, right? Like when you're in the middle of campus, there's all these like really beautiful buildings. You're surrounded by them, and it's a short walk from one end to the other, so you're always just immersed. Stanford to me felt like a place where I could be at peace. It feels a lot like the zoo, actually. Like, I don't know if you like walking down like Arguello, right? It gets to a point where it's when you get near the medical campus, it actually feels kind of like almost like rustic, right? Which I really love. The spirit of innovation was so big there. The sort of spirit of like learn lots of things, really push your mind to expand, was a very big theme throughout, every aspect of the university, which I loved. I love being able to sort of go to like, explore the GSE, explore the CS department, explore the GSB. Like, I would go to all these different classes. I think we've talked about, I got to sit in or take a class with Reid Hoffman, who at the time was, he's founder of LinkedIn. At the time, it was sort of like just like such an amazing experience to be able to like listen to him talk. And he brought in these sort of rock star guests like Brian Chesky of Airbnb and, Elizabeth Holmes, I actually remember, Sam Altman as well, right? So, really, really inspiring in that way, really pushed me to like expand my mind. SCA was able to do it as well. I think that was more because of my innate curiosity. I was like that kid who would, audit like 5 different classes every semester and like overload my schedule just because I got to, right? But I don't let the school itself.
Yeah. I've always felt that the reputation and stereotypes of the two schools like are largely true around like, at least in terms of your areas of interest. If you're really interested in startup tech, there really is very few places I could even imagine that would be better than Stanford, because you're just surrounded by Silicon Valley, the entrepreneurs themselves, the venture capitalists, all the alumni, and even the professors themselves are all involved in this community. And so I actually feel like I didn't take enough advantage while I was there, but it was all around me, right? Yeah. Whereas at SC, if you're really in film, media, entertainment, they have an amazing film school. They are in the middle of Hollywood, and a lot of their alumni are into that space. But that's one of their probably most famous programs. But they also have a number of other very strong programs there as well, including, I feel like, their business program, their engineering programs, certainly the medical school as well. Like, did you find distinct? Yeah, what were your thoughts on the reputations there by that?
Yeah, so I think if I had to boil down the like number one value proposition of SC, it'd be community, right? Or network, right? You immediately get plugged into the Trojan network, right? Super strong. You immediately feel, like I mentioned earlier, just, part of this like very inclusive group. I'm just starting my Marshall mentorship program. And so, getting plugged right back in to the community pretty soon. And fun. I think another big part of like USC branding was really around like just how fun the place is, right? Like I think there were like rankings for like most attractive schools. Now, SC was always like number one, or like in 1 or 2. The football games and sort of like all these like events that the school puts on. They also do so much to broaden like your mind, right? Like in more like a humanities way. So I remember there was always sort of like a free, it was called Visions and Voices. You could sign up for all these different events that they would put on, or they'll take you to like the Getty Museum and then walk you through like the museum and then the Getty Villa, and then I think the Dalai Lama came and spoke. And had a debate with this sort of like moral psychologist, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and these things, right? They're much more focused around like the humanities and who you are as a person and developing yourself. And so yeah, that was my big impression from SC.
That's cool. Yeah, I guess for us, we work really hard with students to make sure that they just understand that a school is so much more than the ranking on like the US News and World Report league tables there. Like you really have to understand what it's like to live at a school, be in that community, because each community has its own personality, right? SC is actually quite different than Stanford, is quite different than Harvard when I was there, right? And you don't really appreciate it until at least you talk to people who have been in that community, right? So cool. I feel like I have to rewind though a little bit, because the decision that you made actually in high school before you even got to SC was also really out of the norm, right? Not just for Asians, but even for Americans. Like, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I'd love to actually dig a little bit deeper. What prompted you to drop out of high school and join the military?
Yeah, that's a interesting experience. So I grew up, sort of as many immigrants do. I moved here when I was 4, and my parents, they couldn't get any sort of a job, right? And so they started a business and worked really, really hard. And their idea of the American dream for their kids was, do well in school, go to good college, get a good job, and live out like a comfortable life, right? That was what they had moved here for, what they sacrificed their lives for. And so we moved to a city that was known for attracting Asian immigrants, predominantly because we had the #1 magnet school, academic magnet in the country at the time, Whitney High. Yeah, and it was we love free high quality education. The only hook is you have to test to get in. So I think I was lucky in that I was sort of like, I was a relatively lazy kid, but I was also I picked up quickly on tests and sort of knew how to do that. And my writing was sort of like naturally pretty good because I read a lot as a child. And so I tested in the school and immediately discovered I was in a school with like 1,000. It was from grade 7 to 12 with about 1,000 very nerdy Asians. And so it was very, very, very uncommon for anyone to do anything except for, go to school, get good grades, go to good college and do that life. And when I was in 10th grade, I remember, being in chemistry class and 9/11 happened. And those 2 planes sort of like, hit the towers. And I just remember like still very clearly, right? It's so weird how this works. They say everyone kind of remembers where they were when 9/11 happened. And I remember thinking to myself, how can someone do that, right? Like, how can someone think it's okay because of any belief to kill thousands of innocent people who had nothing to do, just trying to live their life, right? And then I remember thinking, well, like, what if I had a family? What if like my spouse or my kids were in those buildings, right? What if I was in those buildings and like my family lost like, like a husband or a father, right? It was a very weird thought to have when you're, 16 years old or whatever. But immediately I was sort of thought to myself, what am I doing here? And if people don't volunteer, right, then how can we defend other people who, just trying to live their lives? And it didn't mean we had to go overseas and, be shooting people and blowing things up. It was more just, we need people to sort of like, answer the call, right? And so that's kind of what I did. Dropped out and went down, or before I dropped out, I went to the recruiting station. They're very surprised. They're like, "What are you doing here?"
Like, as a 16-year-old, you were even allowed to do this?
I was a little bit old for my class, and so when you turn 17, your parents can sign a waiver to let you go in. Yeah. And so, and my birthday was coming up, and they're like, "Okay, well, you could." And it's funny. They're like, "Okay, well, this is like the story." They said, "Okay, well, take this test to determine what jobs you can get." And so they gave me this test, and I took it, and then it came back, and my recruiter was like, wow, these are like really good scores, right? Like I haven't seen this, you like max out this test. You can do literally anything you want in the military. And I didn't know anything about the military. That's the weird part. I hadn't been dreaming about it. I didn't know anything about the military even. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. What jobs are there? And he goes, well, you could be like an X-ray technician. You could be like a nuclear, engineer on the submarines. I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. Yeah. And he's like, or he pops in this video with, the guys like, jumping out of the airplane and like fast roping out of the helicopter. And, like going in the little raft called the Zodiacs with like the face paint. I was like, oh, those look super cool. Yeah, sign me for that. I went home. Turns out that's the job that is the lowest, absolute lowest requirement. Or maybe, I think maybe there's like one or two jobs that are like require less, for the military, but it's the one that you need the most. It's infantry, right? About 10% of the military is infantry. And if you think about sort of like any other organizational structure, that's like the purpose of the military or the army is to have these infantry. Everything else kind of revolves around it. And it's a great place to, at least the way they pitch it, is to learn leadership, right? It's where the rubber meets the road. And so, I went home. And my dad was like, you idiot. Like, whoa, what is this? And a couple of months later, then I was just, walking with a big old backpack, like 60, 70, 80 pounds on my back, just sweating and dehydrated and thinking to myself, any minute now that airplane is going to, fly over and land and pick me up, or that helicopter is going to come and we're going to get on. And so I did that. And then when I got back from deployment, I guess I was just lucky, or maybe because I'm sort of unique. There aren't very many people that look like me in the infantry, right? And so my captain, who runs the company, said, hey, we have another company opening up, and they need someone to help run one of the platoons, which is about 30 some odd soldiers.
One, it's incredibly inspiring. Like, I don't think I know of very many people who have sacrificed their early careers to go serve their country like that, and then stuck with it. So first off, like, thank you for your service. I don't think I have the courage myself to have done that, and the thought never really even crossed my mind. But now, as I've gotten older, like I'm so highly appreciative of those who have put in that service, right, to defend my liberty and give me the chances and keep my family safe, right? So thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Also, indirectly, you're doing your part by hanging out with me and keeping me sane, right? And so, thank you for your support.
But okay, as it relates to kind of career development, though, what I found fascinating about your story, and I didn't even realize all the plethora of positions you had done there. It sounds like the military in some ways is like the ultimate job hopping extravaganza, at least for you, to be able to try out so many different skills, functions, roles in full-time capacity as a reserve. So that actually was really interesting. Did you find that any of this experience has translated into your professional experience afterwards, in venture or in startup?
I would say yes, though maybe not as much as I would have liked. A big part of what really made me tick in the military was the leadership and the management of people, right? I really enjoyed that aspect. And again, it gave me the ability to sort of dig deep. I like find the motivation when things are really kind of like not fun. I would say in my job as an operator, it started to show through a lot more. At VIP Kid, we went, when I was there, from about 3,000 employees to 10,000, right? And obviously our team's ballooned in size, and so oftentimes my role was to either build out a new team or jump into an existing team and replace if there's like a leadership transition as sort of like the in the middle person. And so my time managing upwards of like 200 people in the military actually was very directly translated to managing 200 people in China, right?
So yeah, we didn't talk about your title over at VIPK, but I think it's worth mentioning, right? Like, you came in and were chief of staff, right, at a time when the organization was, as you mentioned, was it 10,000?
So yeah, so I joined. Originally, I joined to sort of open the U.S. office. I don't even know what my title was.
Yeah.
Strategy and business or something. And then after we got the office open, a couple of months, like I think it was like 2-3 months, they were like, "Hey, things are growing way too quickly. Why don't you think about coming back? We could use help in headquarters." And being the military guy I am, I'm like, well, if that's where the company needs me, I guess that's where I'll go. And yeah, went there, became chief of staff, and then when I joined the company, we had about 10,000 students and about 1,000 teachers. Or no, sorry, it was maybe 30,000 students and 3,000 teachers. And by the time I left, it was like 1 million students and like 100,000 teachers. Right?
Holy, yeah, it's just like a scale of getting to from 30,000 students to 1 million students. It's like the scale is just like almost unimaginable.
It's crazy. It was a span of like 4 years. Yeah, it was mind-boggling.
Yeah, crazy. Can you explain what venture capital is for, students or listeners who kind of might be curious, have probably seen it in the news, but don't really understand what venture capital is?
Sure. Yeah, so venture capital, essentially, it's the financing of innovation. I think it's like the fancy way or the most like pithy yet fancy way of describing it. But essentially, what you're doing is you're finding companies, and depending on how early, teams, right, with the potential to create something from very, very little, just the beginning of the idea, to something that essentially could change an industry, right? Or at least sell for, a couple $100 million, right? But, so you think about like the people who would believe in and back like Airbnb and Uber when they were first coming out, right? Which, by the way, notoriously very few people did, right? Airbnb at least. And as the industry evolves, it's starting to blend more and more. But depending on whether you consider like only early stage, like very early days as venture capital, versus like you get to a stage where you can call it growth. That's still sometimes referred to as venture capital, sometimes referred to as growth capital. That's when you have a product, it's shown that people want the product, they're buying it. Now you just need to scale your business up. You need money and expertise to do that.
And so for students who might be kind of interested in that field, what do you think are some of the key either skills or personality traits that make someone successful to break into venture capital?
Yeah, I would say, especially if it's a student and very early, I'll start with the hard skills first, right? I think you need to be analytical I think it's technically a hard skill, but the ability to do analytical work and thinking, the ability to do analysis, attention to details, right? As we blend more into like soft skills, this sort of natural curiosity is very important. Initiative, like I mentioned, like venture funds are notoriously small. They won't do much hand-holding most of the time, but they will need somebody who's willing to sort of crank through or churn through work. And so, because there's like a lot of work and not many people to do it, right? I would say humility and humbleness is a big one. It gets very easy to, once you've seen a bunch of these companies, to start picking up this sort of swagger that like a senior partner might have. But at the end of the day, you don't know anything, right? You come out of college, you don't really know how business works. You don't really know, but there's a strong pull to having to sound like you do, right? And so the ability to sort of, keep that at bay, or at least be mindful of it, to always stay hungry, to remember that entrepreneur, no matter the fact that he's coming and asking you for money, right? That he fundamentally knows more about his business than you ever will, probably than your partners ever will, right? The partners at your fund ever will. And so, I think those were big ones that really helped serve me.
Yeah, what you said there actually was really funny. I remember in my days working with a lot of these private companies, I was shocked, like I was like 27, 28, 29 years old. And yet a lot of the CEOs I would meet with would be like really, really impressed. And I was like, I don't really know anything. Why are they so impressed? And they're like, no, you ask good questions and you actually listen, like you want to learn how my business works, right?
Yeah.
And it was shocking how like such a fundamental thing about being curious and being a good listener was actually like a differentiating factor in a lot of these deals, right? Where the CEOs like clearly preferred to work with me and my company, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't that we analyzed the business 10% better than the next guy, you know, like, that didn't matter at all. It actually turned out to be like a very soft skill, like to interact with somebody and build the trust because they thought I listened to them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. You know, when you think about what really determines success in a business, and particularly in a venture fund, right? You need to pick good deals. You need to recognize what's like likely to be a big deal. You need to have like vision, right? Or at least be opinion enough to hold the vision. But ultimately, you can recognize what a good deal is. But if you can't win the deal, right, then it's not of any use at all, right? But yeah, so I think that's, you know, especially at the earlier stages. One thing that's typically helpful is, you know, related to like attention to detail, like a comfort with numbers, right? I mean, it's not hard math or anything like that. It's arithmetic, but an understanding of, you know, or like being willing to sort of dive into numbers and feel like comfortable will keep you from getting lost, right? Which is kind of, again, I think at the higher levels, it's more about vision. You know, a couple of percentages here or there, a couple of sentences here or there, they're not really going to change the ultimate outcome for the fund. Mm-hmm. But to prove your value as an analyst, right, you need to at least have a, you know, fundamental understanding of what's driving value and how to pull that out.
So similarly, given, I mean, I think you're so qualified to answer this next question about entrepreneurs, given you've evaluated and worked with a bunch of entrepreneurs as a venture capitalist, and then you've also been in the startup context yourself and working on several ideas yourself. You know, how much would you recommend a student, like a college student, look to start a company immediately versus go get some experience? And if it's not a general answer, what are some of the conditions that you would analyze or consider before kind of making a recommendation or having them consider?
Yeah. One condition, or maybe two, but the biggest ones, and they're connected, is a deeper understanding of the people you're trying to serve than anybody else, right? Like that is the most important experience that you need at the early stages. And then connected to that is like this willingness to listen and really understand their problem and their need, right? You know, because I've thought about it through my years, right? I'm always sort of like trying to time, when is it time for me to sort of jump and do my thing? And when you're young, the benefit that you have is you have energy, you have, you know, don't know how painful things can be. And so you're almost better off. It's like, you know, if you step slowly into a cold pool, you can always back out. But if you dive right in, you have no option. You got to swim out now. And so that is a big plus. Also, people are more willing to help you. I feel when you're young, right? Like if you're young and you show that you have a lot of initiative, and you can find people who are willing to, you know, lend you a hand and sort of like pay it forward, right? The benefit of starting a business when you're old or older is that you know, have experience. You know how a lot of things can be done. You have like ways of addressing problems or getting over problems because you've dealt with a lot of real issues. You're able to, you know, your solution won't be the exact same. It's not cookie cutter, but you're able to figure out solutions faster. You have a different mindset around it. And so, you know, arguably you can expend less energy to like get the same things done or same level of things done. And you also just have a better way of understanding what good ideas are. right? You know, that's always happening for everyone, each of us, you and me included, Tony. I think we're constantly developing our ability to recognize what a good, you know, what something like a good idea or a good solution looks like, right? Yeah. And so, you know, those are some of the benefits of when you're older. I think you see on both ends, like people who just get out and create something amazing and people who are like have been immersed in their industry and do something amazing. The fundamental thing that unifies those people, right, I think is just the ability to really understand a need that their user has that isn't being fulfilled.
Yeah.
Right. And then build that thing.
I think that's such a pertinent summary, right? Like I have so many people, our SEO students, our Everest students, like come and, hey, Tony, I have this idea for a new business. What do you think? Right. And half the time it's just the business of like, they jump to the solution. Like, what if we do this, 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 and we can deliver it, you know, to the customers and with this business model, or Uber for chefs or whatever it is, right? And the problem is they don't start with that, what is that pain point? What is that problem that they're really trying to solve? They jump to a solution and try and copy paste and think they can just execute it. And, you know, it's just so rare that you see that work, right, without that customer insight.
Yeah. Well, I think that because that's an intuitive thing to do, right? I don't think most people don't think of it as a series of identifying problems and then trying out different solutions to figure out if it really, right? Like that almost have to be like learned through either like books you're reading or, you know, I was lucky. I've just like gone to so many entrepreneurship related courses and read so much material on it and watched so many videos. And so it becomes more ingrained, but intuitively, you don't really think of that, right? If you think of most people who start a business, like, oh, I want to start a restaurant. I want to start a shop down the street, you know, like a shoe shine shop or something. I don't know if anyone starts shoe shine shops anymore, but, you know, versus
get close to the customer and their problems, right?
Exactly. Know that problem better than anyone else, or know that space, you know, better than anyone else.
Okay. Last question for you. For students who might be either in schools in Vietnam or in boarding schools here in the US from Vietnam who want to apply to universities in the US, like some of the amazing schools that you've been to, you know, especially given COVID this year and last year, do you have any particular advice on what they can do to develop themselves from an extracurricular perspective? Yeah.
It sounds cheesy, and I think a lot of parents aren't going to like this answer, but I always go back to, you know, understand your passion, right? Your passions or interests or things that will really, that you are willing to spend a lot of time understanding.
What if you don't know what your passion is?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Most people don't, right? Start exploring, right? Start exploring what they like, do lots of things. Try to identify similarities and what makes them interesting to you. Because otherwise you'll never know, right? You can guess what you might be interested in, but you won't know until you actually do it, right? And so I would recommend trying to do lots of things just that you think you might be interested in. Try to understand similarities. Pick up a good book. I actually have one right here. Called Business Model U. It's quite good. I always give it to my new interns or team members. But essentially trying to connect the dots, like draw the line in your life, connect the dots on what things are really fascinating to you, right? And because at the end of the day, the world is one big, you know, we call it like a talent marketplace, right? At the end of the day, you are in competition with everyone else to do a thing, right? The employer will pick the most ideal, best person for the job that they have. And then if they can't get that person, they'll get the next person, or the next person, and it goes down. And so depending on where you rank and where the employer ranks, right, that's kind of how you are competitive. If you think about what really, like, it's really hard to get very good at things unless you really want to improve. So
what? I have to compete for a job? They don't
you
just
have to
give it to
compete.
me?
Not just, you have to compete for lots of things. Life is it's not zero sum, but it's definitely compete for a spouse. You have to compete for a food, well, money, I guess.
Yeah, developing passions is one of the core things that I think we really focus on with College Compass, on how to authentically help students discover what their passions are, because 90% of high school students have no idea, right? What they're really interested, passionate in. And so how do you create a plan so that you reflect on what your values are, what your skills are, where your development areas are, and any questions that you might have, that you might be curious about, whether it's space or military or philosophy or anything, right? Entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's something I was going to bring up. It's such a good point, right? Find a mentor, find a coach, find people to be sounding boards for your thoughts, your ideas, your assumptions, right? Fundamentally, that is the one big skill that leads to everything else that we've talked about today, right? The things that will help you do well in your career, do well at a startup, and do well in life, right? Yep. And do well good in school. It comes down to being willing to talk to people and get their insights, right?
Well, why don't we wrap it up there for today's session? I feel like there's a million other questions I could ask you, but maybe we'll save that for a second round if we have that opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, this has been really fun, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. So thank you everybody for listening. Chuyện Du Học is a production of College Compass, the college advisory program by Everest Education. We'll be back at 7:30 p.m. every Thursday on YouTube, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. If you like the show, why not recommend it to a friend? And you can also leave us a review or include a topic suggestion. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại.